This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so before I begin, a tremendous thanks to Rabbi Joshua Yoshua Flug from Yeshiva University, who put together all of these sources that I am using for this class. So the big talk of the day, of course, is vaccine. Right? Will we get a vaccine? When will we get a vaccine? How effective will the vaccine be? How safe will the vaccine be? And then once all of that has been resolved, if it ever will be, then the next step is distribution of this vaccine. How do we go about distributing it? And what considerations are taken into account in terms of who gets it, when do they get it? How should a country move forward with these decisions? First of all, there might not be enough vaccines for everybody. So it might be who gets and who doesn't get. And even if there is enough for everybody, right? I think there are about 330 million people in the United States. Is that correct? Thereabouts?
More or less.
Yeah, right. So it's not all going to be one day at Rite Aid that everyone gets it. Okay. So what is the priority on the distribution, on the administering of these vaccines? And there are a number of different models that have been proposed. And on the source sheet, I shared with you the model that is from the National Academies of Science. So just for reference, let's take a look at that on our source sheet. They divide it into phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. Phase 1, high-risk health workers, first responders.
We lost your audio, Rabbi.
Phase 4, everyone else who didn't have access previously. Okay, so the factor that I'd like to focus on today, I think my camera got lost, but do you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
but we
Okay,
don't see your picture. We don't see
I
the
know,
diagram.
I've got a face for radio, but let's see if I can get the camera back on or not. We're back on. Okay, so the question though is, how do we determine the individuals as opposed the individual need as opposed to the public need? For example, maybe giving it to school age children is a more effective way of spreading, of stopping the spread amongst the public than by giving it to older people. So if we're looking at the individual needs, who is at greater risk? Older people are at greater risk. So if we're looking at individual needs, it makes sense, give it to the older population. They are at greater risk than the school-age children. But it could be argued, if we're looking at the public menace, so how do we best contain the spread? How do we best curtail the spread amongst the population? So there we could say, well, there, giving it to the children, the school age, would be a more effective way of stemming the spread than giving it to the older people who are more at risk. In other words, should we be looking at the individuals, or should we be looking at the public? And very often, those two considerations will yield different results as in the example that I just gave. Look at the individuals whose highest risk, the oldest population is highest risk. Nursing homes, highest risk. Give to them. But what is their capacity to spread it? Very, 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 very small, if not nil. Whereas look at school-age children, they're not at risk so much. If they get it, many will get it. They'll be sick maybe for a couple of days, if that, and then they'll be fine for the most part. But giving it to them will stop the spread. So when there is this conflict between looking at the individual needs or looking at the public communal needs, where do we place our emphasis? And
Rabbi,
for that, I'm
Rabbi,
going to share with you a number of very, very interesting Torah sources, one of them which actually speaks to a pandemic. And let's see how the Torah, and when I say the Torah, I mean both the written Torah and the oral Torah, as delivered to Moses, to Moshe on Mount Sinai, which then was incorporated into our Mishnah and our Gemara, and our poskim, our halachic deciders draw from that when it comes to making their decisions, their determinations. So let us examine the different sources. First on the priority, and then also in terms of where it should go to. And then we'll also discuss, let's say, an individual pharmacy, which is allotted 500 doses, perhaps based upon where they are located and the general population there. How do they determine amongst those 500 doses which 500 people should they give to? So let's examine this on a number of levels. And the first source that we'll have is the Gemara in Shabbos. The Gemara Shabbos discusses an interesting case, and I believe, I have it for you both in Hebrew and in English. So everyone should follow along as they feel most comfortable. The second line in Hebrew, V'amar Shmuel, didn't Shmuel say, Mechabin gachelet shel matechet birshut harabim. If there is a metal, glowing coal, hot, red hot coal, not necessarily red hot, hot shard of metal in public domain on Shabbos. Now, at first glance, this does not appear to be, well, we'll see. So one can extinguish that gachelet, that lump of fiery metal, on Shabbos, bishvil shelo yazuku barabim, in order that they will not cause a public menace, danger. Avalo gachelet shel eitz, but if it is a wooden coal, then one cannot extinguish it. Okay, skip down a few lines in the Hebrew. Amar Ravina Hilkach, therefore, similarly, coats. If you've got a thorn, a bundle of thorns that could cause damage, birshut harabim, in public domain, molicho pachot midalet amot, in public domain, one is not allowed to carry more than 8 feet, or 6 feet, we'll say, dalet amot, 4 amot. You should carry it less than those 4 amot, those 6 feet, and put it away from where people are walking, uva carmelit, or in a different domain, not a full public domain, one can carry it even further. Okay, so why are we differentiating? Why do you think the Gemara is differentiating here between the metal coal and the wooden coal. What is the difference over here? Rashi offers a very simple explanation. He said, when you do, one of the 39 prohibited acts on Shabbos is extinguishing. A wooden coal, if I douse it, it becomes extinguished. A metal clump, a piece of metal that's super hot, I don't extinguish that. It doesn't get extinguished. I can cool it off, but it doesn't get extinguished. Therefore, Rashi understands the coal is the wood is a Torah infraction that we're not going to allow, but the metal is a rabbinic infraction. And therefore that we will allow when it's a danger, not life-threatening danger, because if it were a life-threatening danger, then we should allow both. But not a life-threatening danger, but simply something that can harm someone. A Torah prohibition, we don't allow. A rabbinic prohibition, that we do allow. Okay. That is how Rashi explains the difference here. On the source sheet, right underneath that Gemara, I have underlined there Rabbeinu Nisim quotes Bahag, who is of the opinion that the distinction is practical, meaning extinguishing either a metal coal or a wood coal is an Isser D'Oraita, which means it is a Torah level infraction. Either way, we're talking about a Torah level infraction. So why are we differentiating? The difference is that a metal, hot metal, appears to look the same as a cold piece of metal. And therefore there's a greater concern that it will cause harm. A wood coal is easily discernible as being hot.
Rabbi, we lost your audio, I think.
Oh boy.
Can't hear you, Rabbi.
Okay, do you hear me?
Now,
Now we
yes,
do. Okay, I apologize for this. What can we do? Part of the challenges we have. So according to this opinion, it must be that harm to the public is considered pikuach nefesh. If we're even allowing you to extinguish the metal, if we're allowing you to put out the metal, even though it's a Torah infraction, that shows us that harm to the public is considered, that is considered pikuach nefesh. It's like saving lives, which gives us a sense about how seriously we take harm to the public. Okay. The next source I have in Hebrew, not in English. Very interesting case, but what's most important is to hear the wording on it. So those who can follow in Hebrew, it's Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid there. Shnayim sheyoshvim. Two people are sitting. Ubikshu oivim laharog echad mehem. I'm reading a book written by a friend of mine, actually a member of the shul, who wrote a book about his father's Holocaust experience. So if we put ourselves into the mindset of Europe in the 1930s, 40s, this sounds very common almost, tragically. Two people are sitting, and they said, we're going to kill one of you. What should the two of them do? Im echad talmid chacham. And hear me out, because it's going to sound, if one of them is a Torah scholar, v'asheni hedyot, and the second one is a regular guy, mitzvah lehedyot lomar, it's a mitzvah on the regular guy to say, to offer himself, hargeni, v'lo chaverei, kill me, not my friend. Like we find such a case with Ruvain ben Estrabali, that, and he offered himself to be killed instead of Rabbi Akiva. Why? We might think, oh, because he's a Torah sage and he's a common guy. No. Ki rabim hayu tzrichim l'Rabbi Akiva. The reason is not because he's a Torah sage and he's not. The reason is because many people need Rabbi Akiva. Many people need this Torah sage as opposed to this other person. So it's not a matter of Torah scholarship. Rather, it is a matter of public need. That is the criterion here. What is the greater need? Who, in this case, is the greater need for the public? What is the greater help for the public? Again, we see that we take into account the public need even at the expense of the individual, right? This individual might have been 20 years old. Rabbi Akiva was already a sage of 60 or 70, who knows? So who's got more years left? Certainly the younger person normally would have more years left. But we take into account the public need. Next source, the Shulchan Aruch. This is in the laws discussing fast days. And when there is a communal tzara, when there is a communal difficulty, a person needs to be there along with the community. And the Shulchan Aruch says, Shulchan Aruch 574-5, Kol haporesh min hatzibur, anyone who separates him or herself off from the tzibur, from the congregation, eino roa b'nechamatan, when they reach a point of comfort, of solace, of blessing, he will not be part of that. But someone who is there shoulder to shoulder together with the community during a time of difficulty, he will merit and see their being saved. I'm sorry, I haven't been moving I have to move the page down, right? Please, when I forget, make sure to tell me that. I apologize. Okay, there's the Shulchan Aruch. Okay? So again, you have to be there together with the tzibur, with the community. On that, the Magen Avram, one of the great commentators on the Shulchan Aruch, whose commentary is printed right there along in that Shulchan Aruch, he says, I have it both in Hebrew and then paraphrase in English, Hainum yesh biyado la'atzil hatzibur. When must he stay there with them? When he has the ability to save or to help the community. Bein begufa, whether bodily with his body, Bain b'mamono, or with his mamon, or with his assets, with his money, whatever it might be. Aval ileka nafkuta bo, but he's not going to help the situation. Again, reading my friend's book, people are being taken out to the forest to be shot. There's no reason why an individual shouldn't run for his life if he thinks that will, has a chance of being saved. Right? If there's no difference, al yamov makom sakana. Don't stay in a makom sakana. But if you can help others, you should remain there, even though you could run away. And you might be able to save yourself. But if you can help others, then you should stay there and help others. Once again, we see this idea of, we look at the tzibur, we look at the community, we look at the group, and we look to help the group even at the expense of the individual. The Chazon Ish, good, you can still see that one also. The Chazon Ish discusses a case of a grenade that is headed towards a group of people and will kill all of them. Can one pick up the grenade and throw it elsewhere where it will only kill one person? Now, the Gemara discusses, if terrorists demand one person or will kill all of you, I can't volunteer anyone else. I can volunteer myself. That we have a case in the Gemara where the Gemara Tanis tells a story that there was this baseless accusation against the Jewish community because the governor's daughter was killed or was missing. So of course they blamed the Jewish community, and they would all be killed if the killer wouldn't step forward. So there were two people who stepped forward and said, we did it. They didn't do it, but they said, either way we're goners. They're going to kill everyone, so we'll take the hit. So one can volunteer themselves, but one can't volunteer anyone else. We can't decide, well, let's throw this guy out there, let that person be killed. What the group can do is decide, okay, we're going to pick straws. Whoever gets the short straw is the one who goes out. If they all agreed to that, and one guy got the short straw, and that person is now refusing, then they can toss that person out. That was the agreement. But in general, we can't choose one to take the hit for many. So is that what's happening over here? By throwing the grenade off to the side where there's one person, are we choosing this one person to take the hit for everyone? Chazon Ish claims that this is not the same as handing over one arbitrary person to terrorists who demand one person, which one is not allowed to do, because in this case, the act is, in principle, a life-saving act. There, this grenade is going to go off in 10 seconds. Throwing it elsewhere is, in principle, a life-saving act. Whereas handing over one person is an act of cruelty. So he differentiates over there. Chazon Ish nevertheless leaves it as an open question because in reality, it is an act of murder when you throw the grenade to the other side and kill the lone individual. In other words, at least in my head, I hear a difference between diverting it, it's coming your way, knocking it away, or it landed, picking it up and throwing it elsewhere. because maybe that is an act. Maybe that is considered to be an act of murder. But either way, over here, in the parentheses, the implication of this dilemma is that when we need to choose between saving one individual or saving many individuals, we choose the many over the individual. The only question is whether we can actively divert in order to save, which is less relevant to our discussion. Right? In our discussion, we're not talking about actively giving the disease to these people in order to save a larger group from getting the disease. Here we're only talking about vaccine. We're only talking about this hopefully life-saving measure and deciding, do we give it to the individuals who are in greater risk, or do we take into account the public communal greater risk? And it seems clear again that we will go with the many over the individual. Even if these individuals are of a greater risk, if the community would be in better shape, if we give it to those in less risk, but greater propensity to spread it, then it makes sense to give it to them. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, in his Mincha Shlomo, he discusses a case that brings us right into our backyard over here, as he actually discusses immunizations and a plague, a virus, whatever it is, that is spreading around. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, the Chazon Ish, lived until the 1950s or early 1960s. Shlomo Zalman lived until, I believe, the late 1980s. I was living in Israel at the time, and I went to his funeral. His funeral was incredible. There were about 350,000 people at his funeral. And the secular press in Israel were scratching their heads. He wasn't a political person. He wasn't involved in politics at all. He wasn't a massive Rosh Yeshiva, right? But he was a person who was so respected and whose opinions were so sought after by the full range of the religious Israeli society, whether one was more Haredi, black hat, Hasidic, to Kippah Sruga, Hesder Yeshiva. Everyone sought his opinion and his guidance, and he was an incredibly humble person. Whenever anyone would come to see him, he would stand up, greet them warmly. We used to bring boys from my yeshiva to go see him, and the way he spoke to everybody was truly remarkable. He writes as follows. I cut off a little bit, and I don't have it in English, but I'll translate as I go. If the tzibur is being chased near Dafim, midubim, there are wild bears, arayot, lions, asher tzrichim hilachem itam, that you need to protect, battle against them, ulegarsham, and to chase them away. Efsher de levad mimai de choshiv hatzalat nefashot, besides that this is life-threatening, mitzvah al kol adam l'chalal Shabbat b'kedoma b'kedei latzil, and everyone would have a mitzvah to desecrate Shabbos if necessary in order to save the lives. Efsher dechashiv nami kimlechemet mitzvah. Interesting. He says this might also be considered. We have a category of milchemet reshut and milchemet mitzvah. Milchama is a war. Milchemet reshut is a voluntary war. And Milchemet Mitzvah is a mitzvah, commanded war, right? The land of Israel, etc. Even though nowadays we don't have a king, we don't have a proper Beit Din, nevertheless, the leaders of a city, of a country, are able lachof u'lesakein b'kach chaya anashim. They could send people in there to do the job, kamo b'milchama, like in a battle, like in a war. When there's a war, what's happening? We're sending individuals into harm's way for the sake of the community, for the sake of the country, for the sake of the population at large. That's what we do. And if we'll be true to this understanding, it's possible also when it comes to a war against machalot, against diseases. When there's a plague, when there is a pandemic, ha'aravot, which is affecting, ambushing, l'chaye ha'adam, lives of people, havinami ke'ein milchemet mitzvah. This is also like a milchemet mitzvah. Ve'im hayinu zochim she'akol yasel pi dat Torah, and if a country is being run based on the directives of the Torah, efshar sha'beitin hayaroa b'tzorach shel nisayon trufot k'milchemet mitzvah shel tzal nefashot. It's possible the Beit Din would see the need of trying out these different medications, vaccines, like a milchemet mitzvah. In which case, he doesn't say it clearly, but they could even force people the same way that soldiers are sent to the front. People could be sent to take these different vaccines, even during the testing stage. He doesn't go as far to say that, but what he does say, therefore in our time, even though the countries are not being run based on the Torah guidance, since it's being done by experts, and it's being done very carefully, Rabbi, with great care, mistaber, it's logical, she'ein isur litnadev lekach. That was the actual issue. Can a person volunteer for one of these trials? Can a person volunteer for a trial? And he says, yes, certainly a person can volunteer for the trial. Right? And he doesn't say it explicitly, but in comparing it to going to battle, it seems almost that they would be able to have different people take this, even still in the trial phase, which is not what we're talking about. Not what we're talking about. But once again, we have the same idea, and here he's actually speaking about a pandemic, where our overriding concern needs to be the many. Our overriding concern needs to be the many. And therefore, according to all these sources, it seems pretty clear that the government has the ability, the right, the moral right and the legal right to allocate the vaccines as they are coming out and to distribute it to a certain group that will produce a better overall public outcome, even at the expense of those individuals who might be in a higher risk category, but they're receiving it instead of others. Of course, if everyone can get, that's the ideal. But where we need to choose, their allocation could and should be according to that which will yield the better overall outcome for the public, for society, even at the expense of not giving it to certain people who they themselves might be particularly high-risk individuals. Okay, so let's take this a step further now. So different areas were given different amounts. Rite Aid over here next to us got 500 doses. So what should my personal approach be? I'm not necessarily high risk, getting on in years, but not necessarily high risk at this point. Should I say, let me sit back and let others get it, even though I have no way of knowing that those who will line up over there will necessarily be high risk? Maybe other people who are also low risk might reach a different conclusion. So I might argue to myself, why should I give up my vaccine to someone else who is low risk, like myself? So how should it then be distributed at that point? So there's a very, very famous Gemara source, which tells in Bab Metzia Daf Samach Bet 62. And I have it here both in Hebrew and in English. Okay? The Gemara says, Likiditanya, as we learned. He utilizes it for that which was taught in the English. Shnayim shahayu mahalchin baderech. Two people traveling on a road, on a journey. They're out in a desert. There's no water there. Uviyad echad mehen kiton shel mayim. One of them has a canteen of water. Im shotin, if he will split it up, I'll take half and give half to the other person traveling with me. Then shnehem meitim. And the way this is mostly understood is we'll make it another 6 hours, another 8 hours, but there's nothing 6 hours, 8 hours up. So it's going to be futile. If the imshota echamehen, if the guy that the canteen is his, if he keeps that for himself, magia li shuv, there is civilization 12 hours away. If he drinks it himself, he'll make it. If he splits it, they're both going to die in 6 hours. Now, maybe someone will come. Maybe they'll be found. Maybe they'll find an oasis. Maybe. But for all intents and purposes, chances are, if he gives half to the other guy, in 6 hours he's dead. He keeps it for himself, in 12 hours he'll stagger into the next community and he'll be alive. What should a person do in that situation? Darash ben Petora taught, Mutav sheyishtu shneim. They both should drink. V'yamutu, even if they'll both end up dying. V'al yira echad mehem mitato shel chavero. And one should not stand there watching the death of his friend. That was Ben Petora's approach. Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva, until Rabbi Akiva came. V'limed, and he taught, V'chai achicha imach. The pasuk says, your brother should live with you. With you. Chayecha kodmim l'chayei chaverecha. Your life comes before someone else's life. Chayecha kodmim. Your life takes precedence. There's another source, and then we'll discuss this. The pasuk in Bamidbar, pasuk Perek Tet Vav, in Numbers chapter 15. Ki yeh b'cha evyon. when there will be an Evyon. Evyon is a poor person. We'll soon see the root of the word Evyon. Me'echad echacha, from one of your brothers. Be'echad sha'arecha, on one of your gates. Bi'artzecha, in your land. So there's a poor person amongst your brothers, in your gates, in your land, asher Hashem l'kecha noten lach, that God has given to you. Lo tametz et levavcha, don't harden your heart. V'lo tikpotz et yadcha, and do not close your hand, shut your hand, me'achecha hevyon, from your brother who is poor. Rather, you must be sure to give to him, to help him out. But this pasuk, as psukim normally are, is packed with information. Look how the Sifri, one of the Midrashim here, how the Sifri unpacks it. Oh, we read it, so you have to help out, right? Don't be closed-fisted, you got to help out. Yes, but there's so much unpacking to be done in this pasuk. Evyon, the Sifri says. I have it in Hebrew, not in English, but you'll listen along, those who have problem following the Hebrew. Evyon, that comes from the root ta'ev, hungry. Ha-ta'ev, ta'ev kodem. How desperate is the person in need? That will determine who goes first. Achecha, your brother, achecha me'avicha, that actually means a paternal brother. Me'achad achecha, right, from one of your brothers, okay. Be'achad sha'arecha, so first comes your relatives. And then it says be'achad sha'arecha, and one of your gates. What does that teach me? Yoshvei irecha, the inhabitants of your gate, of your city. Chodmin will take precedent, liyoshvei iracheret, than those of another city. Ba'artzecha, in your land, in your country. Yoshvei haaretz, the inhabitants of Israel, Kodmin, will take precedence, liyoshvei chutz la'aretz, over those who are living in chutz la'aretz, outside of Israel, outside of your land. So it's not simply telling you, make sure to give, make sure to help, but it's giving us a whole list of priorities as to how one should help. Meaning, once we are taking care of the public need, once we are best tending to the needs of the many, within that many, within that group, how do we then start to allocate? And our Gemara is giving us, the Torah is giving us these priorities. Number one, ta'ev kodem, those who are most in need. Healthcare workers, those who are most in need. They are the ones who are being exposed, who are putting themselves in harm's way to help others. Or high-risk individuals. They are the ta'ev kodem, those who are most hungry, meaning most in need in the pasuk's jargon, most hungry in terms of the help. In our situation, greatest need for that, they will go first. Everyone else on the same risk level, so then you would keep it local, but there, according to Rav Moshe Feinstein, it is a first come, first serve basis. So we have two different orbits over here. One is, where should it be directed? And there we're not going to look at the personal need at the expense of the public need. Whatever is the best for the population at large, for society, for the public, for the many, that is where we need to direct it. Again, in the example I gave before, if giving school-age children will stem the spread and save many more lives than giving it to high-risk individuals who are not in contact with other people, then it's best to give it to those who have less personal risk, but thereby quelling, diminishing the societal, communal, public menace, public risk. So there we look at the public, not at the individual. Once we are no longer deciding which group will get, but within whatever group is getting, so then we need to look at we need to look at who is in greatest need, who is in danger, either because first responders, healthcare workers, they are the ones who are putting themselves out there, or the older population because they are at a greater risk. So once we've already put aside the individual or the public, and now we've distributed this to this group and that to that group, within that, there we need to go first to those who need it the most. Hata'ev, ta'ev kodem, as the Sifra said. And afterwards, then first come, first serve basis. We don't say this person's more important or that person's more important, right? There, a person needs to go on a first come, first served basis. Those are the sources. Once again, a tremendous thank you to Rabbi Joshua Flug. Right? These are his sources, and I just selected and copied and perhaps explained a little bit, but basically shared that with you. And amazing times we're living through. And the Torah gives us, Torah, we always say, is called Torat Chaim. Torat Chaim is translated often as a living Torah, but also Torat, Zot Torat Achat, that means these are the instructions for bringing whatever one might bring. So Torat Chaim becomes instructions for life. And the Torah gives us guidance as to how to proceed in all situations, even in this pandemic situation. And certainly we hope that Hashem will send a blessing and this vaccine will be an effective vaccine. And I'm confident that it won't be released until the scientific medical field feels that this is safe, effective. I'll be first to line up, not at the expense of others if they need more, but otherwise I'm all in on getting the vaccine when it's ready. And we should all be healthy and well. Let this all be academic. Let this virus disappear the way that it came, though I don't see that happening. And may Hashem find good messengers who are working day and night to try to find a vaccine or further the vaccine. May we all be healthy and well. And if and when the vaccine comes, may it all be widely distributed to all of us, the entire country, the entire world, and let us all be able to move on from this predicament that we find ourselves in. Okay, any points, questions anybody would like to add? Once again, I wish we could be in person, and that gives a whole different synergy as things are going on. But this is the reality of the world as it is now. Anybody feel free to open up your mics, make any points, any questions. Otherwise, good seeing everybody, and look forward to seeing everybody soon. If not in person, then we'll continue to see each other virtually. Okay, everybody's very quiet. Everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Just making sure. Make sure I'm not talking into a tunnel over here. Very
you.
good.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Okay, good seeing everybody. Good to see you, Rose. Very good, everybody. Good, good, good.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Be well, everybody. Be well, be well. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very, very welcome. You're very welcome. Tara, good to see you also.
Thank
Oh,
you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Bob is there. Nice to see you, Bob. Good. And Norman, good to see you. Okay, everybody. Have a good day, everybody.
Have a good day too.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.